The great hall of Duke Anelm was illuminated by flickering candlelight, as though the flames themselves recoiled from the harsh decree being pronounced. Marianne stood centrally, her hands tightly clasped in front of her to conceal their persistent quivering. The emerald silk of her gown, strained across her ample form despite her seamstress's best efforts, caught the glow with every shallow breath she drew. "It has been determined," her father declared, his voice possessing the chilling finality of a headsman's axe blow. "You will be dispatched to Lord Raziel's fortress at daybreak." From their places at the long dining table, Marianne's younger sisters exchanged fleeting glances, their expressions a confused mix of relief and pity. They were the celebrated ones, willowy, compliant, and perfectly groomed for politically advantageous marriages. Marianne, conversely, had always been the family disappointment, too voluptuous, too fond of books, too inclined to question her father's severe governance of their lands. "Father," she began, her voice gaining a strength she didn't feel, "this alliance could be cemented purely through trade agreements, through silent understanding." Duke Anelm brought his fist crashing down onto the wooden armrest of his chair. Goblets on the table rattled violently, spilling crimson wine that, in the shadowy light, bore a disturbing resemblance to blood. "The Alpha has demanded tribute, and I have selected you," he spat. "Consider yourself lucky I found any purpose for you at all." The Duchess, Marianne's stepmother, never even lifted her eyes from her meal. "It is a noble sacrifice, Marianne. Your father's standing with the court is unstable. This will ease tensions with those creatures in the mountains." Creatures. As if Lord Raziel and his kind were nothing more than mere beasts. Marianne knew the tales. Everyone in Drom did. The immortal lord who commanded the northern mountains, whose legions had repelled invading forces that would have pulverized the human kingdoms centuries earlier. A treaty was established, one that required regular contributions, typically gold, occasionally artifacts, but never human lives, until now. "May I at least gather my personal effects?" Marianne requested, determined to maintain her composure. Her father dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Take only what fits in one trunk, nothing of value. It would be squandered on you, and Lord Raziel has no need for our baubles." In her personal chambers, Marianne moved by rote, selecting functional attire instead of the elaborate gowns her sisters favored. Into the trunk went her warmest cloaks, her simplest dresses, and concealed beneath them the treasured books she held most dear. If she was destined to die, she would at least have her beloved stories to accompany her to the end. Elise, her lady's maid, the sole person in the household who had ever demonstrated true compassion, wept quietly while helping her pack. "My lady, the mountains are perilous, even without—" Elise couldn't complete her sentence. "Without the fiends who reside there," Marianne finished for her, a bitter curve touching her full lips. "I've survived 18 years among the monsters of this castle, Elise. Perhaps I'll fare better with ones who don't pretend to be human." When dawn broke, a small detachment waited in the courtyard. 4 guards, a driver, and the enclosed wagon that would transport Marianne to her destiny. No family members came to offer a farewell. The morning fog enveloped the stone yard like a shroud as she ascended into the wagon, rejecting the guards' assistance. If this was to be her last journey as herself, she resolved to undertake it with whatever shred of dignity she had left. The passage consumed 3 days, winding through increasingly rugged landscapes. The forests grew denser, and settlements became sparse. On the 3rd day, their ascent into the mountains began. Marianne observed from the small window as the world she knew receded below. The guards grew progressively anxious with every passing mile, their hands resting on their sword hilts, their eyes constantly scanning the shadows among the trees. They arrived at the iron gates of Raziel's fortress as the sun was setting, staining the rock walls crimson. The fortress bore little resemblance to the gruesome descriptions of tavern lore. There were no skull-adorned spikes or a moat of gore. Instead, it was elegantly severe, ancient stone emerging naturally from the mountainside, its windows glinting like watchful eyes in the fading light. The gates swung open with no visible operator. "This is our limit," the captain of the guard announced, his voice tight with unconcealed fear. "The Duke's orders were only to deliver you to the gate." Marianne was unsurprised. Of course, her father's men would not risk stepping beyond this point. She climbed down from the wagon, adjusting her cloak against the mountain chill. "My trunk," she began. "We leave it here," the captain interrupted. They will bring it inside." Before Marianne could respond, the guards had abruptly wheeled the wagon around, desperate to start their descent before complete darkness set in. She watched them go, these men who had known her all their lives, abandoning her without a backward glance. When they vanished around the road's bend, Marianne turned to face the open gates. Beyond them lay a courtyard where torches blazed in wall sconces, casting dancing shadows. She inhaled deeply and took a step forward. As she crossed the threshold between her former life and whatever awaited her, the heavy gates closed behind her with a sound like thunder. "Welcome to Blackest Fortress, Lady Marianne." The voice resonated from everywhere and nowhere, deep, resonant, and carrying an unfamiliar ancient accent that transformed the common tongue into something musical. Marianne spun around, searching for the source. A figure materialized from the darkness beneath an archway. Impossibly tall, with shoulders suggesting strength beyond human reckoning, he moved with a predatory fluidity. Every step was deliberate, utterly soundless on the stone. As he entered the torchlight, Marianne fought the urge to recoil. Lord Raziel was nothing like she had anticipated. The tavern tales painted a fiend, fanged, hand-clawed, and skin like a cadaver. The man before her was monstrous only in his devastating beauty. His face was a study of sharp angles, cheekbones that seemed capable of cutting, a jawline defined like sculpted marble. His hair, black as a starless midnight, fell in waves to his shoulders, and his eyes, they glowed like embers, a red so deep it bordered on black, watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "You are not what your father described in his correspondence," Raziel stated, circling her slowly, examining her as one might an unexpected gift. Marianne lifted her chin. "And what did my father describe, my lord?" A slight smile touched Raziel's lips, revealing the barest hint of elongated canines. "He called you his burden, his disgrace." The smile vanished, replaced with something colder. "He said you were being sent as a punishment for both you and me." The word stung, though it was nothing Marianne had not heard before. Still, to have her father's contempt so baldly relayed to a stranger, to the creature he had essentially sold her to, burned like salt in an open wound. "My father has never valued what he fails to understand," she said, proud that her voice remained steady. "And what, I wonder, does Duke Anelm fail to comprehend about his eldest daughter?" Marianne met his burning gaze directly. If this was to be her final moment, she would face it without flinching. "Everything, my lord, everything that truly matters." Something flickered in Raziel's expression, perhaps surprise or curiosity. For a long moment he was silent, simply studying her face as if searching for a hidden script. Finally, he took a step back and gestured toward the fortress's grand double doors. "Come, Lady Marianne. Night falls rapidly in the mountains, and there is much to discuss. Your chambers have been prepared." He glanced back at the gates where her trunk remained. With a casual wave of his hand, the heavy luggage rose into the air as if weightless and floated toward them. "You will find all you require there. You are not a prisoner here, despite your father's intentions." As she followed Raziel into the fortress, Marianne couldn't help but question if that was a statement of truth or merely a charming deception. After all, what was a cage if not a place you could never leave? The heavy gates closed behind them, and Marianne stepped into her new life, uncertain whether it would prove to be her salvation or her doom. The interior of Blackest fortress contradicted every rumor Marianne had ever heard about the dwellings of vampires. Instead of damp dungeons and coffins, she walked through halls adorned with tapestries depicting ancient conflicts, illuminated by crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow prisms across marble floors. The air held a faint fragrance of sea. "Sit," Raziel invited, indicating the bench. "Tonight's lesson begins here." Marianne sat, smoothing her skirts. Each evening for the past week, Raziel had taught her something new: the language of an extinct civilization, the properties of rare herbs that grew only in moonlight, the true histories behind legends humans still misremembered. "What will I learn tonight?" she asked, unable to suppress the eagerness in her voice. Despite everything, these lessons had become the highlight of her days. Raziel smiled, an expression that softened his severe features into something almost warm. "Tonight, Lady Marianne, you learn about yourself." He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the peculiar coolness emanating from him. From his pocket, he drew a small silver mirror. "Look," he instructed, holding it before her. Marianne saw her own reflection, full cheeks flushed with color, dark hair waving around her shoulders, eyes wide with curiosity. Nothing she hadn't seen before. "What am I supposed to observe?" "Tell me what you see," he said, his voice soft yet insistent. She sighed. "I see what I've always seen. A face too round, a figure too full, a disappointment to my father's house." Raziel's expression darkened. "Your father's cruelty has obscured your sight." He slightly angled the mirror. "Look again. See what I see." Something in his tone compelled Marianne to look closer. In the silver surface, her features seemed subtly different. Her full cheeks were not a flaw, but a softness that balanced the determination in her jaw. Her dark eyes, which her sisters called too serious, held depth and intelligence. Her curves, evident even beneath modest attire, spoke of abundance rather than excess. "I see strength," Raziel said, watching her face as she studied her reflection. "I see a woman who survived a household designed to crush her spirit and emerged with her compassion intact. I see a curiosity that runs deeper than fear. I see beauty that has nothing to do with court standards and everything to do with life fully embodied." Marianne looked up from the mirror to find his gaze intensely fixed on her face. "Why are you saying these things?" "Because they are true," he stated. He returned the mirror to his pocket. And the first lesson any student of power must master is to recognize the truth of themselves, unfiltered through the expectations of others. The pool before them suddenly rippled, though no wind stirred the night air. Raziel passed his hand over its surface, and the water began to glow with a soft blue luminescence. "Water remembers," he explained. "It retains impressions of what it has touched. Watch." Images formed in the glowing pool. Marianne as a child, climbing trees while her sisters played with dolls. Marianne at 12, secretly teaching a kitchen maid to read.
Marianne at 16, standing firm against her father's rage over her rejection of a suitor 3 times her age. "How are you achieving this?" she whispered, mesmerized by the scenes from her own life. "I am not. You are," Raziel countered, gesturing to her hand, which had unconsciously rested on the stone edge of the pool. "Your touch, your essence, your memories. The water merely reflects what already exists within you." The pool's glow became fiercer, and images swirled too rapidly to discern. Marianne felt a stirring within her, a latent force she was previously unaware of, responding to Raziel's touch, his words, and the magic saturating the water. "What is happening?" she gasped as the sensation intensified, feeling like fire under her skin. "This is you awakening," Raziel stated, his eyes now blazing as brightly as the pool itself. "There is magic in your bloodline, dormant until now. I sensed it the moment you stepped across my boundary." The blue luminosity spread from the pool up Marianne's arm, creating a network of glowing lines like visible veins beneath her skin. It brought no pain, rather it felt like emerging into sunlight after a lifetime in the gloom. "This is precisely why he feared you," Raziel continued, his eyes now blazing as brightly as the pool itself. "Not for your figure or your rebelliousness, but because Dut Anelm instinctively sensed what you might become, what you truly are." The light pulsed with brilliant force, then receded, sinking back into the pool, until the water returned to darkness. Marianne felt altered, somehow lighter, as if an unseen burden had been lifted. "What am I?" she asked, her voice hushed. Raziel's hand rested on top of hers, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. "You are an inheritor of the old blood, humans who once traversed between dimensions, wielding powers now forgotten. Such lineages have attenuated over millennia, but occasionally they resurface." "That's why you agreed to take me," Marianne finished, comprehension dawning. "Not out of compassion or to spite my father, but because of this heritage." A shadow crossed his features. "That was my initial fascination, yes. The old blood holds value from my species. However, these past days have revealed much more than just your lineage, Lady Marianne." He stood, offering his hand to assist her ascent. As she took it, Marianne felt that same subtle yet unmistakable spark of energy pass between them. "Tomorrow we begin your true education, if you are willing." Marianne looked from their joined hands to his face, searching those ancient eyes for any sign of deceit, but finding only intensity and something that looked remarkably like hope. "I am willing," she confirmed. As they walked back through the maze, now bathed in moonlight, Marianne felt a peculiar sense of homecoming, as if the path she had been forced onto was in fact the one she had been seeking all along. Behind them, the pool at the center of the maze stirred once more. In its dark surface, fleeting images formed and dissolved. A crown of twisted silver, a chalice overflowing with crimson, a castle in flames. And throughout the fortress, in chambers where ancient protective wards had slumbered for centuries, runes began to glow with renewed purpose. The old blood had returned to Blackest fortress, and nothing would ever be the same.
And beneath these pressing, immediate concerns lay the ultimate question: the ritual, the eternal bond, the metamorphosis Raziel had put forth. A choice that would irrevocably redirect the course of her entire existence. The horn blared again, significantly closer now. Time was rapidly escaping them. "I must know, Marianne," Raziel urged, his voice filled with urgency, yet profoundly gentle. "When they demand to know your allegiance, what will be your declaration?" Marianne gazed at the advancing army, then returned her gaze to the ancient vampire who had demonstrated more respect and value in a few weeks than her entire family had in a lifetime. The one who had ignited her power, who saw inherent worth where others saw only inadequacy. The Immortal who now extended a place at his side, not as a possession, but as a true equal. Her reply, when it came, astonished even herself with its absolute certainty. "I will speak the truth," she declared, "that I am precisely where I have chosen to be." The throne room of Blackest Fortress had not hosted royal delegates for over 2 centuries. Now it was crowded with the king's representatives, knights in gleaming armor, scribes with their parchments, and at their head, Lord Chancellor Tiberius, the second most influential man in the kingdom. Marianne watched them from her position beside Raziel's obsidian throne. She had meticulously selected her attire for this confrontation, a gown of deep crimson that celebrated her full figure instead of concealing it. Her dark hair flowed freely, adorned with silver crescent moon combs. She stood, no longer the discarded daughter, but a woman who had fully embraced her own formidable power. "Lord Raziel," the Chancellor began, his voice bearing the polished authority of a monarch's speaker. "His Majesty King Edmund IV demands a full accounting of your actions. You have illegally detained a nobleman's daughter, violating established treaties between our peoples." Raziel sat with the leisurely posture of a predator completely unthreatened, one leg crossed over the other, his fingers tented before him. His voice, when he responded, conveyed millennia of unquestioned command. "I have breached no treaty, Chancellor. Duke Anelm willingly offered his daughter as tribute. I merely accepted. The transaction was his doing, not mine." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "A convenient interpretation. Nonetheless, the lady must be returned to her family immediately, and suitable reparations made for this affront." "I will not be returned," Marianne spoke, her voice ringing clear and steady. "I remain at Blackest of my own free will." All eyes snapped toward her, some curious, some frankly suspicious, some openly hostile. The Chancellor examined her, seeking any sign of duress or enchantment. "Lady Marianne," he said, shifting to a tone one might use for a confused minor, "your father has expressed grave concern for your well-being, regardless of whatever influence Raziel has leveraged over you." "My father," Marianne cut in, "expressed zero concern when he delivered me to these gates as a punishment. He expressed no concern for the 18 years he undermined and shamed me for not conforming to his restricted concept of worth." Her voice held steady, but the candles in the hall visibly flickered in response to her rising emotions. His concern only materialized when he realized he required me as a bargaining piece yet again. The Chancellor exchanged uneasy glances with his knights. "Be that as it may, you are a subject of the crown. The king cannot permit his people to be claimed by vampire lords, regardless of the circumstances of their arrival." "I am claimed by no one," Marianne stated resolutely. "I have discovered my true heritage here, the old blood that courses through my veins, a legacy my father actively sought to suppress. I have found a sense of purpose and respect that was consistently denied to me in my father's house." At the mention of the old blood, a visible shiver of unease passed through the royal delegation. The Chancellor's face grew hard. "The old blood," he repeated, the words loaded with ancient fear. "Then the rumors are accurate. You engage in forbidden sorcery, vampire." Raziel rose in a single fluid movement, power emanating from him like intense heat from a forge. "The old blood is forbidden only by human fiat, Chancellor.
My people recall a time when such powers were venerated rather than feared, when mortals and immortals walked together in harmony, not separated by bigotry. The air in the throne room became heavily charged, tension mounting like the moment before a lightning strike. Knights instinctively gripped their sword hilts. "The king's stance is definitive," the chancellor declared. "Lady Marianne must accompany us, and Blackest Fortress must accede to royal oversight. Those are our non-negotiable terms." "And should we decline?" Raziel's voice was dangerously quiet. The chancellor's reply matched his low volume. "Then the full strength of the royal army awaits your decision. 50 men today, 500 tomorrow, however many are necessary." A cold certainty settled over Marianne. There would be no peaceful outcome with men who feared what they didn't grasp, who viewed the power of others as a threat to be crushed or controlled. Her father had clearly poisoned the king's ear with tales of vampire enchantment and forbidden arts, playing upon deep-seated prejudices to recover his lost leverage. She stepped forward, positioning herself between Raziel and the royal delegation. "There is an alternative path," she said, her voice commanding a new authority that caused even the chancellor to pause. "A demonstration, Marianne," Raziel warmed softly behind her, recognizing her intention. "They need to witness it," she murmured, glancing back into his ember eyes, "as I have witnessed it." Before anyone could interfere, Marianne extended her hands. The candle flames throughout the hall shot upward, then detached completely from their wicks, floating into the air like miniature fiery stars. They began to orbit the room, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the astonished faces of the royal delegation. "The old blood is not a source of terror," she asserted, controlling the flames with her will. "It is the shared heritage of both humans and vampires, a bridge between worlds that have drifted too far apart." With a focused gesture, she collected the flames into a spinning column before her. Within its core, images coalesced, scenes from the history Raziel had taught her, showing the two races living in mutual respect before fear drove them to conflict. "This is what was," she said. Then, with another movement of her hands, the vision changed to the present. Human kingdoms and vampire territories separated by treaties founded on suspicion, each side weakened by the division. "And this is what is." The chancellor stumbled backward, his composure finally dissolving. "Witchcraft," he hissed. "Dark magic." "Truth," Marianne corrected. With a decisive gesture, she extinguished the flames, momentarily plunging the hall into darkness before the normal candles reignited, leaving behind a power you cannot hope to control through mere brute force. Raziel moved to her side, his shoulder brushing hers in silent, powerful support. "Return to your king, Chancellor. Inform him that Blackest Fortress remains sovereign, as it has for a millennium. Inform him that Lady Marianne remains here as my honored guest and ally, and tell him that any attempt to alter these facts by force will be met with consequences his army is entirely unprepared to face." The threat hung in the air, undeniable. The chancellor looked from Raziel to Marianne, calculation replacing fear in his eyes. "This matter is not concluded," he said at last. "The king will not tolerate defiance, not from a vampire nor a witch." "Then perhaps," Marianne suggested, "the king should reconsider what constitutes defiance and what constitutes choice." After the royal delegation hastily retreated, Marianne stood on the fortress walls, watching their procession wind back down the mountain path. The sun was setting, bathing the valley in gold and crimson. "They will return," Raziel said, joining her at the parapet. "I know," Marianne turned to face him. In the fading light, his features seemed softer, more human. "Which is precisely why we must act now." Comprehension dawned in his eyes. "The ritual," You've made your decision. I have. I had spent the hours following the confrontation deep in contemplation, weighing everything she had learned, everything she had become, and the immense potential of what lay ahead. I choose to stay, to complete what we have started. Raziel studied her face, finding no trace of doubt. You grasp the magnitude of this? The binding is irrevocable. What we become eternally. I understand.
The old blood texts speak of this, Lord Corvinus murmured, recognizing the ancient symbols drawn on their hands. The convergence of realms. It was thought lost to time. Not lost, Raziel corrected, merely forgotten, as were many truths about our origins. When the preparations were finished, Marianne and Raziel stood facing each other at the chamber's heart, their marked hands pressed together. The runes began to glow with the now familiar blue light as they spoke the words of power in unison, an ancient language that predated both human and vampire civilizations. The vampire lords stepped back as the air around the couple began to shimmer, reality itself bending to their combined will. Through their profound connection, Marianne could feel Raziel's 9 centuries of power merging with her awakened old blood, forging a strength neither could have accessed alone. "It is time," Raziel said softly. "Are you ready?" Marianne nodded, her eyes reflecting the azure glow of the awakened magic. Together they raised their joined hands, and the power flowed outward from them like ripples in a pond. Outside, the royal army had begun its methodical advance up the mountain path. Formations moved with practiced military precision, siege engines lumbering behind them. The king's battle mages accompanied the troops, ready to counter any vampiric enchantments. The first indication that something extraordinary was occurring came when the sky above Blackest darkened unnaturally despite the morning sun. Clouds gathered with impossible speed, swirling in concentric circles above the fortress. The soldiers froze, unease spreading through their ranks. Lightning flashed within the clouds, not the natural blue-white of a storm, but the same azure luminescence that marked the old blood magic. The air grew heavy, charged with a power that raised the hair on every soldier's neck. Then, from the highest tower of Blackest, a beam of blue light shot upward into the center of the cloud formation. Where it touched, the veil between worlds thinned. Ghostly, translucent towers and walls began to appear around the physical fortress, overlapping with the mortal realm and revealing the shadow paths and parallel dimensions that intersected at this nexus. The sight was as breathtaking as it was terrifying. Blackest now appeared not as a single fortress, but as a convergence of many fortresses existing in different realms, all occupying the same space. The mountain itself seemed to swell, growing larger and more imposing as aspects of its existence in other dimensions became partially visible. From within the ritual chamber, Marianne and Raziel maintained their connection, sweat beading on their brows from the effort of holding open the veil. Through their bond, each felt the other's strength surging into them when their own faltered. "It's working," Marianne whispered, her voice strained. "I can feel their fear." "Now for the final demonstration," Raziel replied. With a surge of combined will, they directed the gathered power downward toward the mountain path. The blue light swept across the path, and where it touched, reality rippled. Soldiers found themselves temporarily shifted a few feet into one of the shadow realms, becoming translucent, unable to interact with the physical world, before snapping back into normal existence. Seconds later, weapons fell from nerveless fingers as panic spread through the ranks. No blood had been spilled, no direct attack launched, Yet the message was unmistakable. They faced power beyond their human comprehension. The Chancellor, watching from what he had believed to be a safe distance, found his voice first. "Retreat! Fall back to the encampment!" As the royal forces scrambled to withdraw, Marianne and Raziel released their hold on the veil. The ghostly overlapping structures faded, the sky cleared, and the mountain returned to its normal, imposing appearance. Exhausted but triumphant, they leaned against each other for support. "That," Lord Raziel said into the stunned silence that followed, "was unlike anything I have witnessed in 3 centuries of existence." "They will return with terms," Raziel predicted, his voice weary but satisfied. No king would risk his army against such power. Marianne nodded. But as the initial exhilaration faded, she felt a strange tugging sensation at the edge of her awareness. Something ancient stirred in the shadows between worlds, awakened by their working. "Raziel," she whispered, "I think we've disturbed something in the veil." The royal forces retreated to their encampment, leaving Blackest in an uneasy calm. Within the fortress, Marianne and Raziel withdrew to their chambers to recover from the immense energy expended. The allied vampire lords remained in the great hall, discussing the profound implications of what they had witnessed. "Something is wrong," Marianne whispered, as Raziel helped her to a chaise near the fireplace. "When we opened the veil, I felt something respond, something ancient." Raziel's expression grew grave. "The nexus points between worlds have guardians, entities that maintain the boundaries. Our working may have disturbed them." "Not just disturbed," Marianne corrected, rubbing her aching temples. "Awakened. I can still feel it. A presence watching from between the shadows." Raziel knelt beside her, taking her hands. Through their bond, he sensed her deep unease. "Describe what you feel." "It's like a heartbeat, but irregular, pulsing from somewhere both near and impossibly distant." Her eyes met his, concern evident. "It knows us now, Raziel. It knows what we've become." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Lilith burst into the room, her violet eyes wide with alarm. "My lord, my lady, the mirrors, all throughout the fortress." They followed her to the nearest chamber with a large mirror. The silver-backed glass, once reflective, now appeared like a window into swirling darkness. As they watched, the darkness coalesced into shapes, moving shadows that seemed to press against the glass from the other side. "The Umbra," Lord Corvinus breathed, having followed the disturbance. "The shadow beings that dwell in the spaces between worlds. They haven't been seen in millennia." The shadows continued to shift and press against the mirror's surface, as if testing the strength of the barrier. Similar reports came from throughout the fortress, every reflective surface showing the same disturbing phenomenon. "What do they want?" Marianne asked, instinctively moving closer to Raziel. "To cross over," he replied grimly. "The Umbra were banished when the worlds were separated, creatures too dangerous to exist in either realm. Our working weakened the barriers." "Can they break through?" "Not without help from our side," Lord Raziel said, studying the mirror with scholarly interest despite the danger. "They need a doorway willingly opened." Marianne's blood ran cold as realization dawned. "My father, the royal army. If the Umbra can communicate with them, promise them power in exchange for access, then we face a threat far greater than a human army. They have already taken him. The Chancellor,
They're using the humans to set a trap, trying to lure us out of the fortress during the new moon, when the veil will be thinnest." Lord Septimus nodded grimly. "We found references. The Umbra peak in power during the new moon. If they secure a physical anchor in our world, a willing host of significant power, they could tear open the veil permanently." "A willing host," Marianne repeated, a terrible suspicion solidifying. "My father, the royal army. If the Umbra can communicate with them, promise them power in exchange for access, then we face a threat far greater than a human army." "They have already taken him," she announced without preamble in the Great Hall. "The Chancellor. They're using the humans to set a trap, trying to lure us out of the fortress during the new moon, when the veil will be thinnest." Lord Septimus nodded grimly. "We found references. The Umbra peak in power during the new moon. If they secure a physical anchor in our world, a willing host of significant power, they could tear open the veil permanently." "A willing host," Marianne repeated, a terrible suspicion solidifying. "My father, the royal army. If the Umbra—"
The royal forces had established fortified positions along the mountain paths, neither advancing nor retreating. Through her amplified senses, Marianne could feel malevolent energies moving among them, shadows that did not belong to human bodies. "We must begin," she urged, her focus sharp. "The longer we hesitate, the stronger their influence becomes." Lilith approached, carrying a silver bowl filled with a mixture of herbs, oils, and powdered crystals, binding agents from Raziel's secure vaults. The vampire lords took their places, each holding an ancient artifact to serve as an anchor for the immense energy needed to repair the veil. "When the ritual starts," Lord Corvinus warned, "the Umbra will feel their opportunity slipping away. They will fight back with everything. Be prepared for their psychic assault." Marianne nodded, drawing strength from her bond with Raziel. Together, they began to chant in the ancient tongue. The runes on the floor glowed with blue fire, energy flowing between them. The vampire lords joined in, their voices resonating with the very fabric of reality. Marianne felt the veil respond, thinning further, but now under controlled guidance, like a wound being reopened to be properly cleansed and stitched. Through this thinning, she perceived the Umbra clearly, entities of void and hunger, their hatred a palpable cold malevolence. As the ritual progressed, Marianne's consciousness expanded. She sensed movement in the royal camp, a gathering of shadows around one central figure whose aura burned with a familiar, bitter vengeance. "My father!" she gasped between chants. "The Umbra have him!" Raziel's grip tightened, his voice unwavering. Through their bond, he communicated, "Focus on the veil. We cannot help him now." But Marianne could not ignore the vision. The Umbra were pouring in to Duke Anelm, his body expanding and distorting as he became a vessel for the shadow entities. His hatred had made him the perfect, willing host. The royal soldiers backed away in horror as the Duke's form swelled, becoming a towering monstrosity of shadow and corrupted flesh. "They're creating an anchor," Lord Septimus hissed, perceiving the dire threat. "A physical manifestation to tear the veil permanently." "We must accelerate the ritual," Raziel decided, increasing the tempo of the chant. The energy in the chamber intensified. Marianne felt the tears in the veil begin to knit together, but then the attack came. A psychic assault so ferocious that several daywalkers collapsed instantly. Marianne and Raziel, sharing the pressure through their bond, faced the brunt of the storm. Marianne felt her skull would split. Foreign thoughts and images flooded her mind. "You cannot close what was always meant to be open," voices hissed in her mind. "This world is rightfully ours."
Lies, Raziel growled. They were banished for consuming entire realms. They would drain this world dry. Outside, the transformed Duke Anelm, now a monstrosity of shadow and corrupted flesh, began to climb the mountain path. "The breach is widening," Lord Corvinus shouted. "The ritual isn't strong enough." Desperation gave Marianne clarity. She remembered Raziel's words. "It requires sacrifice, not death, but something freely given." "Raziel," she gasped, meeting his blazing eyes. "We need more power." Understanding flashed in his ancient gaze. Without hesitation, he kissed her knuckles and then used a sharp nail to slice across his own palm. Blood welled, bright with their shared life. "My immortality, I offer it freely to seal the veil. 9 centuries of power accumulated. Take it all to heal the veil." Raziel's blood hit the stone floor and exploded into a nova of blue-white energy. Marianne felt him weakening beside her, centuries of power draining from him. He was reducing his own lifespan to save the world. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not alone." Instantly, she sliced her own palm and pressed it against his bleeding wound. "My old blood, awakened, I offer it freely, joined with yours." Their mingled blood ignited with blinding intensity. Outside, the shadow-corrupted Duke Anelm streamed in rage as his connection to the Umbra frayed. The entities possessing him fought desperately, but the power emanating from Blackest was inexorable. The ritual reached its crescendo. The vampire lords channeled the immense energy into the nexus points. One by one, the breaches sealed with flashes of blue-white light. With a final thunderous crack, the last breach sealed. The light vanished. In the darkness, the daywalkers rushed to relight the torches. They found Marianne and Raziel collapsed in the center of the circle, still clutching hands, both deathly pale. "They live," Lord Corvinus announced, after checking them, "but barely. The sacrifice was nearly too great." On the mountain path, only a heap of ordinary clothing and a film of ash remained of Duke Anelm. The royal forces, having witnessed the horror, had broken ranks and fled. For 7 days and 7 nights, Marianne and Raziel lay motionless, attended by Lilith. The vampire lords maintained a worried vigil. The sacrifice had sealed the veil, but the true cost remained unknown. On the 8th dawn, as light touched the windows, Marianne stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that had changed. Still her warm brown, but now flecked with crimson embers like Raziel's. Beside her, Raziel remained unmoving, his skin bearing an ashen pallor. "Raziel," she whispered, reaching for his hand. Through their bond, she sensed him, distant, fading, but present. "Come back to me." "The veil sealed completely," Lord Corvinus stated from the doorway. "The Umbra are banished. Your sacrifice accomplished the impossible." Marianne slowly sat up. "What happened to the royal army?" "They scattered," Lord Varius replied. "The Chancellor was found wandering the forest, his mind broken. The king has withdrawn his forces entirely." "Good." She focused on Raziel, placing her hand on his chest, feeling a heartbeat that was slow, even for a vampire. "He gave too much. He offered 9 centuries of accumulated power," Lord Corvinus said solemnly. "Such sacrifice is unprecedented. By rights, it should have destroyed him." "But it didn't," Marianne replied with quiet determination. "Our bond preserved him, but he needs more than just time to recover. He needs blood, old blood." Understanding dawned in the ancient eyes of the vampire lords. Raziel's essence had been depleted. "You cannot give more," Lord Septimus warned. "You barely survived yourself." "Not mine," Marianne agreed, "but I'm not the only one with the old blood in my veins." She looked meaningfully at the assembled lords. You all carry traces of it, diluted by centuries but present nonetheless. Together, it might be enough. The lords exchanged uneasy glances. Blood-sharing among them was an intimate act, one that some had never anticipated. "You ask much," Lord Corvinus said. "I ask what he gave freely to save us all. The Umbra would have consumed your territories, drained every living being in this realm. Raziel sacrificed centuries of his existence to prevent that." Silence fell. Finally, Lord Varius stepped forward. "I will contribute. My lineage is youngest, but my blood still carries the old essence." One by one, the others reluctantly followed, agreeing to the alliance forged not by treaty, but by a desperate need to save the one who had saved them all.
"This creates blood debt," Lord Corvinus warned. "He will be bound to us, as we to him." "Then let it be a covenant of alliance, rather than a debt," Marianne suggested. "A new agreement among your kind, with Blackest as its center." The ritual to restore Raziel was simpler, but no less solemn. As twilight fell, the vampire lords gathered around his bed, each making a small cut on their wrist to let 7 drops of blood fall into a silver chalice. Marianne added her own contribution last, 7 drops from directly over her heart. "Blood freely given," she intoned, lifting the chalice. "Life offered without coercion. Return what was sacrificed." With gentle care, she parted Raziel's lips and poured the mingled blood into his mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his throat convulsed as he swallowed, and a shudder passed through his entire body. His eyes snapped open, the deep crimson now interlaced with streaks of amber and gold, colors no vampire had ever displayed before. He gasped, drawing a deep breath, his gaze immediately finding Marianne. "You brought me back," he whispered. "We brought you back," she corrected, gesturing to the gathered vampire lords. "Your sacrifice has forged a new alliance." Raziel's gaze moved to each ancient vampire, recognition and gratitude for their unprecedented action reflected in his transformed eyes. "I am in your debt." "No," Lord Corvinus said firmly. "You are in our covenant. The old ways are changing. What you and Lady Marianne have become, it heralds a new era for our kind." In the days that followed, Raziel's strength returned. Both he and Marianne found that their transformation had evolved further. Their powers had become more complementary. Where Raziel had once commanded fear and shadow, he now wielded light as well. Marianne's connection to the elements deepened, allowing her to sense the very heartbeat of the mountain. The most profound discovery came on the full moon following their recovery. As they stood on the eastern tower, Marianne felt a strange fluttering sensation within her abdomen, a second heartbeat, tiny but unmistakable. "Impossible," Raziel breathed when she guided his hand to feel it. "Vampires cannot." "We are not merely vampires anymore," Marianne reminded him, wonder in her voice. "The old blood has restored what was lost. Life creates life once more." The news spread, seen by neighboring humans as a miraculous omen. Word reached the royal capital, where King Edmund IV, humbled by his army's defeat, took the advice of his new, practical chancellor. "If we cannot conquer them, we should ally with them. The world is changing, Your Majesty. Better to be part of that change than swept aside by it." 3 months after the sealing of the veil, a royal emissary arrived at Blackest with an offer of formal alliance, recognizing Blackest as a sovereign realm with established trade and diplomatic ties. Marianne, now visibly pregnant, received the emissary in the Great Hall, Raziel at her side. "Tell your king that Blackest accepts the alliance with certain conditions. The persecution of those with old blood must end throughout the kingdom. Knowledge long suppressed must be allowed to resurface."
"And the shadow paths?" the emissary asked cautiously. "Remain closed," Raziel assured him. "The boundaries between realms are stronger now than they have been in millennia." As the emissary departed, Marianne and Raziel stood on the fortress walls. The mountain path below was now lined with spontaneous flowering plants whose blue petals glowed faintly at twilight, a residual effect of the ritual. "Do you think they will honor it?" Marianne asked. "Humans have short memories for both danger and wonder." "Some do," Raziel acknowledged, covering her hand. "But we have time now. Time to build something that will last." He smiled. "Our child will be born into a world of new possibilities." "Speaking of our child," Marianne said, guiding his hand to where the baby kicked vigorously, "I've been thinking of names." "Names carry power," Raziel murmured, his expression softening. "Elara," Marianne suggested softly, "for the woman's curse that became your redemption." Emotion flickered across Raziel's face, grief, gratitude, hope, before he nodded. Elara, a fitting tribute to the past and a promise for the future. 2 years passed. Blackest Fortress became the heart of a thriving community. The alliance brought integration that many had thought impossible. On this particular evening, Marianne stood on the balcony, watching the sunset. Elara, now 18 months old, slept peacefully in her arms, her skin glowing faintly in the twilight. The child was clearly neither fully human nor vampire, but something entirely new. "She sleeps more soundly in the open air," Raziel observed, joining them. "Perhaps she feels closer to the stars," Marianne replied with a smile. Elara had earlier demonstrated an ability, making small objects float briefly. "Her powers manifest earlier than we expected," Raziel said, pride evident. "The old blood runs strong in her." Their moment was interrupted by a daywalker messenger. "My lord, my lady, visitors have arrived at the main gate. They claim to be family of Lady Marianne." "My sisters," Marianne confirmed, her expression tightening. In the great hall, Elaine and Cecilia stood nervously. They looked regal, but weary. "Sisters," Marianne greeted them, entering with Elara sleeping on her shoulder. Elaine curtsied formally. "Marianne, we thought you dead." Much happened that night, including our father's choice to surrender himself to forces he didn't understand. He was as much victim as vessel in the end. An awkward silence fell, broken when Elara stirred, blinking awake with eyes that shifted color in the torchlight, sometimes brown, sometimes ember red, sometimes a shade of violet. "Is this?" Cecilia stared in fascination. "Your niece," Marianne confirmed. Elaine tentatively approached. "She's beautiful. We heard rumors but didn't believe. A vampire lord and a human woman producing a child." "I am not merely human anymore," Marianne reminded her gently. "That's why we came," Elaine said, straightening. "There are changes throughout the kingdom. Children are being born with strange abilities. Old stories of the old blood are resurfacing." Raziel stepped forward. "Children with abilities? How many?" "Dozens that we know of. Parents fear persecution." "And you came to warn us?" Marianne asked, sensing more. Elaine reached into her cloak and withdrew a small wooden box, opening it to reveal a silver amulet set with a blue stone that pulsed with faint inner light. "We came because of this," Elaine explained. "It belonged to our grandmother. Our stepmother gave it to me with a confession." "What confession?" "Our family, the female line, has carried the old blood for generations. Grandmother could heal. Our mother could speak to birds. Father forbade any mention of it. He saw the potential in you from birth. The midwife said you were born with a halo of blue light. He took it as an ill omen." Marianne absorbed the revelation. Her father's disdain, his determined effort to break her spirit, it all made a terrible, tragic sense. He knew what I might become and feared it above all else. His entire life was spent suppressing the old blood in his family, only to have his efforts undone when he sent you to me, Raziel concluded. Elaine offered the amulet. This is rightfully yours. As Marianne reached for it, Ilara suddenly lunged forward, her tiny hands grasping the blue stone. The moment she touched it, the gem flared with brilliant light. Symbols appeared on its surface, the same ancient runes from the veil sealing ritual. The hearthstone, Raziel breathed. I thought it lost centuries ago. It's older than any vampire lordship, he explained. Created during the time before separation, it's said to contain the essence of the first nexus, the original connection point between realms. Ilara babbled happily. Through their bond, Marianne sensed Raziel's astonishment give way to profound understanding. She recognizes it. The stone responds to her as if they are kin. Because they are, a new voice announced. Lady Morgana strode into the hall. The child is a nexus incarnate, a living bridge between realms. That is why she could be conceived. How do you know this? Marianne demanded, holding Ilara close. Because I was there when the hearthstone was created. Before I became a vampire, I helped forge it as a safeguard. I opposed your ritual because I feared what might emerge. The last time beings of both realms produced offspring, the resulting children nearly tore reality apart. Morgana regarded Ilara with a mixture of weariness and wonder.
The little girl, Ilara, giggled, reaching out with her tiny hands to grasp the beams of starlight. Where her fingers passed through the light, small sparks of blue energy danced and swirled, responding to her delighted laughter. She needs protection, Marianne said, watching her daughter's innocent play with cosmic forces. Training, understanding of what she is. She needs more than Blackest can provide alone. Then perhaps it is time to expand our sanctuary, Raziel agreed, looking to Morgana and Marianne's sisters. To create a place where all children of the awakened blood can learn safely, without fear. Is that why we were drawn here? Elaine asked, hesitantly. Because of our bloodline? The old blood calls to its own, Morgana confirmed, especially in times of transformation. You felt the pull without understanding it. Will you stay? Marianne asked her sisters, the question surprising her with its sincerity. Help us build something new? Cecilia looked to Elaine, who nodded slowly. We have nothing to return to that matters more than this. If children across the kingdom need guidance, we want to be part of that. As the family reunion continued, the hearthstone's pulse grew stronger, synchronizing with the blue star overhead. Ancient magic awakened further, spreading through the mountain beneath them and out into the distant corners of the kingdom where children dreamed of blue light and possibilities their parents never imagined. The legacy of blood, once divided, had only begun to reveal its true purpose. 5 years had passed since the sealing of the veil. Blackest Fortress had transformed from an isolated outpost into a beacon of hope and learning. At the heart of this change stood the Academy of Convergence, established in the eastern wing of the fortress. Here, children with awakened old blood abilities learned to control their gifts under the guidance of both human and vampire instructors. Elaine and Cecilia had found their purpose as the Academy's administrators, their natural talents amplified by the awakening of their own dormant abilities. Elaine's gift for ancient languages, Cecilia's affinity for plants. On this morning, Marianne watched a class of young students practicing elemental control. Among them, Ilara, now 4 years old, demonstrated a focus and power that surpassed children twice her age, coaxing water from the fountain to form intricate, ephemeral patterns. She grows stronger daily,
Raziel observed, joining Marianne beneath an ancient oak. Too strong, too fast, Marianne replied, worry clouding her voice. Morgana says her development exceeds all historical records. Their conversation paused as a messenger approached. My lord, my lady, travelers approach from the royal capital. The royal banner flies among them. The royal princess rides with them. This was unexpected. Princess Sophia, the king's sole daughter and heir, had never ventured near Blackest, despite the alliance. Prepare the great hall for formal reception, Marianne instructed. By midday, Princess Sophia and her small retinue arrived. The princess, barely 16, appeared both regal and nervous. Welcome to Blackest, Your Highness, Marianne greeted her. She took a deep breath. Lady Marianne, Lord Raziel, I come seeking asylum and instruction. She pulled off her riding gloves, revealing hands marked with faint blue lines that pulsed beneath her skin. The old blood has awakened in me, and I have nowhere else to turn. Does your father know you're here? Raziel asked carefully. He sent me, Sophia replied reluctantly. The abilities manifested 3 months ago. He determined Blackest was the only place I could learn control safely. You are welcome here, Princess, Marianne said, her expression softening. At that moment, the doors burst open as Ilara ran in, excited. She skidded to a halt before the princess, staring up at her with wide, color-shifting eyes. You're like me, she declared with a child's directness. I can see the blue light in you. Princess Sophia knelt, wonder replacing her nervousness. Yes, I suppose I am, though I don't yet understand what that means. It means you're part of the great pattern, Ilara explained with eerie certainty. Lady Morgana stepped forward from the shadows. The child speaks truth. The convergence accelerates. More awakened children are born daily. The balance shifts. Is this convergence dangerous? The princess asked, rising to her feet. Change always carries risk, Raziel acknowledged, but greater danger lies in resistance. The separation of realms was never meant to be permanent, merely a pause. Like rivers that divide only to merge stronger downstream, Marianne added, gesturing to a map showing territories where old blood manifestations were reported. Blackest sits at the center, but the awakening spreads in concentric circles. Your royal bloodline was bound to be affected eventually. That evening, during a formal dinner, Raziel addressed the assembled guests. Tonight marks the 5th anniversary of the veil sealing, 5 years since sacrifice healed ancient wounds. We gather to witness the next stage of our journey. Morgana stepped forward. The time has come to complete what was begun. The hearthstone must return to the nexus point. Not to seal the veil further, she explained, but to stabilize it as the convergence continues. The separation between worlds thins naturally. The hearthstone was created as a regulator to manage the flow between worlds. It must be placed at the primary nexus point beneath the Blackest, within the original ritual chamber. It will harmonize the convergence, ensuring it happens gradually, safely. Ilara approached her mother, small hand reaching for the glowing hearthstone pendant. I need to take it, she said with that same strange certainty. It's calling to me. No one is asking her to bear it alone, Princess Sophia said unexpectedly, joining Ilara. I feel it too, the pull of the stone, the resonance with the nexus. This is why I was drawn here. The meaning was clear. The convergence required new alliances, the princess representing human royalty, Ilara embodying the union of vampire and old blood. They proceeded to the ancient ritual chamber. At the center, a small pedestal of crystal had emerged from the stone, a natural formation grown in response to the magic. Marianne removed the amulet. She knelt before Ilara. I'm not afraid, mother, Ilara replied with a smile that held wisdom beyond her years.
Hand in hand with Princess Sophia, Ilara approached the crystal pedestal. As the children placed the hearthstone upon the crystal, a column of blue light erupted, shooting upward through the mountain. The chamber filled with a high musical tone as the runes blazed. Through the light, ghostly images of other ordered realms appeared. The hearthstone pulsed, then settled into a steady rhythm that matched the heartbeats of all present. "It is done," Morgana announced. "The convergence will continue, but gradually now, with purpose rather than chaos. The realms will reconnect in harmony." In the days that followed, reports arrived of increased old blood manifestations across the kingdom. Yet where there once was fear, there was now growing understanding. Princess Sophia embraced this new reality, becoming a student at the Academy of Convergence while maintaining her position as heir to the throne. 5 years after Duke Anelm had sent his unwanted daughter to a vampire lord as punishment, the worlds he feared were coming together, not in conquest, but in the deliberate healing of ancient divisions. The daughter he scorned now stood as Lady of Blackest, architect of a new era. On the evening of Ilara's 5th birthday, Marianne found Raziel on their favorite balcony. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The sacrifice you made? The centuries you gave up?" Raziel's smile held no trace of his former coldness. "I sacrificed extended time to gain true life." His hand found hers. 900 years of existence pale beside 5 years of living. Below, Ilara looked up and waved. Around her neck, she wore a tiny shard of the hearthstone, a permanent connection to the nexus. "My father thought he was punishing us both," Marianne said. "But what he really did," Raziel added, his gaze moving to Marianne's gently rounded abdomen, where their second child grew, "was heal a division centuries in the making and create something neither world had seen before." As darkness fell, the blue star took its place above Blackest. In the fortress and surrounding villages, people paused to look upward, feeling the connection to something larger than themselves. In Blackest, where the veil between realms had been first torn and then healed, a new chapter had begun, one written not in separation and fear, but in convergence and hope. The story of Marianne and Raziel concludes here.